We're going to get started this Tuesday with exactly 3 weeks to go until Election Day, just 21 days. But some people are getting their opportunity to start voting today. In battleground Georgia, in-person early voting is getting underway. The state, of course, played a crucial role in President Joe Biden winning the White House back in 2020. Former President Trump is set to hold a rally later tonight in Atlanta. Early voting will also get started this week in the critical states of North Carolina and Nevada. Now, Mr. Trump and Vice President Harris held dueling events yesterday in another important state, Pennsylvania. The candidates continue to take jabs at each other, while the former president also took aim at President Biden.
I didn't think I'd ever say this about anybody. She's actually, you take a look at her, she's more dangerous than him, but he's actually smarter than her. I never thought I'd say that. I never thought I'd say that.
Donald Trump, I think in our collective opinion, certainly mine, is an unserious man. But the consequences of him ever being president again are brutally serious.
We've got team coverage ahead this hour, including the results of a new NBC News poll breaking down who is voting early in this election and where. But let's get started with NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. John, always great to have you with us. So 21 days, as I just said, until Election Day, but early voting getting underway today in Georgia. Now, according to data from Target Smart, this was analyzed by NBC News' decision desk, more than 5.1 million people have already voted. What is the state of the race now as the campaigns begin to wind down, and what's the implication of that early vote number?
Well, certainly it's underway, Savannah, as you point out, with 5.1 million people already having voted. The state of the race is not that much different than it has been before. Basically, you've got 7 swing states and Omaha, Nebraska, the 2nd congressional district of Nebraska, basically about 15% of the states in the country, in play here. And, I think both sides see this as within the margin of error within all 7 of those swing states.
Former President Trump, as I mentioned, he held this town hall. It was last night. It was in Oaks, Pennsylvania, of course, an all-important state in many elections, and certainly in this one. The event, though, was interrupted a couple times. There were medical incidents. It sort of turned into an impromptu concert. Tell us what happened at the event and also takeaways from Mr. Trump's remarks, especially with just a few weeks to go.
I think we're all trying to still figure out exactly what happened last night, even the people who were there. To your point, there were some need for medical attention. Our colleagues at NBC who were in the room there said that it was, that it was warm. Trump made some reference to a lack of air conditioning, and then, basically said they didn't really need to have a town hall. They should just have a concert, played a bunch of music. November Rain from Guns N' Roses was the last song. He also had YMCA from the Village People. It's an odd situation. On the other hand, I'm not sure that anybody who turns up to a Trump rally is necessarily there because they are trying to make a decision about whether or not they like Donald Trump. Typically, they've already made that decision. So I'm not sure he loses any voters from that. But we will be spending some time today trying to figure out exactly what went on.
Smart point there. Let's talk now, of course, about the Harris campaign. So the vice president is heading to Detroit today. Specifically, her mission there is courting black voters. Tell us about the campaign's efforts to reach those voters, particularly black men.
Yeah, there are a variety of efforts going on, including, Vice President Harris emphasizing parts of her policy agenda that are either geared toward black men specifically or simply would have, in her view, a positive effect on black men in addition to other groups. We saw former President Barack Obama just speak on behalf of her in Pittsburgh and address black men. Specifically, the issue for her is that polls suggest that there's some slippage in terms of the traditional Democratic advantage with black men, and even more than, the percentages, because the overwhelming majority of black men are going to vote for Harris if they vote. And, one of the big issues here is for her, whether she can get enthusiasm, whether she can get the kind of turnout that she needs, particularly in big cities in the swing states among black men.
Also, we had seen early criticism of the vice president for not sitting down for interviews, not being super available to the media. But then since we've seen this correction to sort of this media swing, and she's actually slated to sit down for her first formal interview with Fox News. Tell us the strategy there. Is it persuading a different audience, finding new voters potentially, or something else you think?
I mean, there's a real asymmetry between these two candidates. Everybody in the country knows Donald Trump. They love him or loathe him. They know how they feel about him. With Vice President Harris, there is still, there's still sort of an ability to raise the ceiling a little bit in that there are voters who have not yet made their decisions about her. It's very late in the campaign for that to be the case, and yet at the same time, she came into this campaign late. So, look, I think she would rather be in a position right now where she was just trying to turn out people who had already been persuaded. But obviously, the campaign still thinks it needs to do work on convincing folks.
All right, there we go. John, thank you as always. Now let's go to our NBC News senior political editor, Mark Murray. Mark, good morning. So we have new data from our NBC News poll, another drop of numbers here. So what should we know about how voters are planning to cast their ballots in this election, especially knowing that in certain states, an important one like Georgia, it's getting underway now or soon?
Yeah, Savannah, our poll finds that half of voters, 52%, say that they plan to vote early or they've already voted early. And that includes 5% of voters who said they've already cast ballots. Savannah, it's important to note that our poll was in the field middle part of last week. And so that 5% who said they've already cast ballots probably might end up being a little bit higher right now as we speak, especially with early voting starting today in Georgia.
And that's important, right? Because there is a big partisan divide when it comes to people who vote early versus people who do plan to head to the polls on Election Day itself. Also has a big impact, right, on how votes are counted and when we get results and what that vote count looks like as it starts to come in on election night. How does it break out between Republicans and Democrats?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Our poll finds that Harris voters say that they're going to vote early by 17 percentage points, that if you're voting early, you're backing Harris by 17 points. If you're an Election Day voter, however, you're backing Donald Trump by 21 points. And Savannah, as you just mentioned, this is very important when we get to Election Day and we're sorting through all the battleground state returns where you end up getting dumps of ballots that are in person and the early vote comes in. Well, that should be expected to be highly Democratic. And then when the Election Day vote comes in, that should be highly Republican. So it's important to keep those distinctions and differences in mind.
And Mark, with 3 weeks to go until the election, what does polling data tell us at this point about the state of the race, that big horse race number? Are voters pretty set at this point on who they're supporting, or are there still votes up for grabs for these candidates?
So our ballot that ended up having a tie 48-48 between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris nationally had just 4% of voters who said they were undecided, didn't want to vote, were considering other candidates in that forced two-way head-to-head contest. But when we asked it a different way, could you still change your mind? We found that 10% of voters say that they could end up having their vote up for grabs. And while that's just a sliver of the electorate, that could end up being crucial in the key states.
Mark Murray, thank you very much for walking us through our new numbers here. Well, 2 men wounded in the assassination attempt on former President Trump this past summer in Pennsylvania are speaking out for the first time, and they are exclusively telling NBC News about the horror they went through and the anger they still feel 3 months later. Here's NBC News Now anchor Tom Yamas with their story.
I was more mad about it than anything. I mean, I was in the service, went through a war, didn't even get a scratch, and then you go to a rally and you get shot in a crowd.
What were you mad about?
The security, the fact they tried to shoot the president, shot into a defenseless crowd.
Pennsylvania residents David Dutch and Jim Copenhaver didn't know each other until they became linked by tragedy. They each were hit with bullets aimed at former President Trump during that assassination attempt in Butler.
Jim, when did you realize something was wrong?
When I saw part of my sleeve go away, and I heard, I heard it distinctly. And I turned around to my friend and I said, I think I was shot.
Copenhaver, who is 74, now walks with a cane. He was shot twice. One bullet tore into his tricep, a scar he could show us. But the other bullet is still lodged in his body, taking chunks of his colon and leaving him with nerve damage.
Feels like somebody's taking a cigarette and burning right in the middle of my leg.
Attorneys for both men say this video shows them getting shot. Copenhaver in the white long sleeve, Dutch further right in the American flag T-shirt. The bullet that hit Dutch split his liver.
It was like getting hit with a sledgehammer right in the chest. I could feel my ribs were all busted up. So I was kind of just holding it.
You could feel your ribs?
Oh, yeah.
Pennsylvania's governor says firefighter Corey Compantori was shot and killed while trying to protect his family at the rally. Congress and the Secret Service are now investigating. The head of the Secret Service resigned. The agency has called Butler a failure, acknowledging communication breakdowns.
Did the Secret Service fail former President Trump and fail you that day?
Oh, yes, big time.
It was a rush job, you know. It was put together too quickly, and they skipped steps.
The FBI says there was a second attempt on former President Trump's life, which the Secret Service was able to stop. And just this weekend, a man in California was arrested, allegedly for having weapons and ammo in his car as he tried entering a Trump rally. That man has said he actually supports Trump and denies he was trying to assassinate him.
All right, Tom Yamas, thank you for that report. Well, we turn now to the latest in the Middle East, where Israel's war with Iranian-backed terrorist groups continues to rage on two fronts. In northern Lebanon, Israel's war with Hezbollah. An Israeli airstrike hit an apartment building, killing at least 21 people, according to the Lebanese Red Cross. This comes a day after a Hezbollah drone attack on an army base in northern Israel killed at least 4 Israeli soldiers and injured more than 60 others. In the Gaza Strip, Israel continues to attack Hamas. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, at least 55 people have been killed in the latest wave of Israeli attacks across the area. NBC News international correspondent Megan Fitzgerald joins us now with more. Megan, good morning. So let's start with the latest out of Gaza. In the past couple of days, the Israeli military has launched deadly strikes on a school and a hospital where displaced Palestinians were sheltering. Tell us more about the situation there and why these attacks, according to Israel.
Well, Savannah, good morning. Look, we continue to see a situation in northern Gaza that remains dire. We continue to see the IDF really tightening its grip on the northern part of the Strip. The UN going as far as to say that it's appearing as though northern Gaza is being completely cut off from the rest of the enclave. And we've seen several strikes overnight into the morning. And according to Palestinian officials, as you mentioned, at least 55 people have been killed in the last 24 hours, including women and children. So keep in mind, we're talking about the part of the enclave that's home to well over half of the territory's more than 2 million people. So again, we're talking about a dire situation for the innocent civilians who still remain in the area, Savannah.
And well, now it's been nearly 2 weeks since the Iranian missile strikes on targets in Israel. According to a report in the Washington Post citing 2 sources familiar with the matter, Netanyahu told the Biden administration that Israel's retaliation will strike the Iranian military, but not their nuclear or oil facilities. Now, NBC News reached out to the White House overnight for comment. We have not received a response there. The Prime Minister's office, though, did say in a statement, we listen to the United States, but we will make our final decision based on national interest. Has the Israeli government commented on this report? Would this be a sign of restraint from Israel? What do we think we may see in this retaliation, and when?
Yeah, so look, you know, if this report is accurate, this certainly could be a sign of restraint from Israel. I mean, this report seems to suggest that we could be seeing a more limited strike on Iran, which could potentially prevent a regional war. But look, we've been reporting for months that tensions just continue to rise. And as Israel seems to be preparing a counterstrike, which we don't have an exact indication of when, the volatility in this area just continues to escalate, Savannah.
Also, the UN Security Council has expressed strong concern, were their words on Monday, as Israel fired on and wounded UN peacekeepers in southern Lebanon during intensified fighting. Again, that's that front with Hezbollah in the north of Israel. Tell us more about this and the growing rift between Israel and the UN here.
Right. So we heard from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday, rejecting claims that the IDF deliberately harmed UN peacekeepers, calling the accusations completely false. He went on to say that he regretted the fact that UNIFIL personnel have been harmed, but that they need to evacuate the area to ensure their own safety. But the UN has been very clear about this, and they continue to insist that they're not leaving, stressing the importance of having a UN presence in this area. Savannah.
All right, Megan, thank you so much. Well, perhaps no one symbolized the plight of the hostages in Gaza more than American-born Hirsch Goldberg Poland. This morning, his parents are speaking for the first time since his brutal death at the end of August. NBC News correspondent Erin McLaughlin has their story.
He was really a lovely, gentle person. He really believed that peace would be very hard, but that it could be possible.
My name is Hirsch Goldberg Poland.
The day 23-year-old Hirsch Goldberg Poland was executed by Hamas, along with 5 of the other hostages. His parents, Rachel and John, were at the Gaza border.
Stay strong. Survive.
Hirsch was found on his knees, frozen on his knees with his back against the wall. He had put up his hands. You know, he only had one hand. He put up his arms to protect himself. The gunshot, one of them was so, right on his hand, went through his hand into his neck and came out the side of his head. Hirsch was just shy of 6 feet. He weighed 115 pounds. 53 kilo when we buried him. I think that it's really critical that the world knows that that is how these hostages are being held.
Rachel and John say the month before Hirsch was killed, they'd had reason to hope there'd be a deal to stop the bloodshed in Gaza and to release the hostages.
So many of our leaders in the military and intelligence community in Israel were saying, this is a moment. We should do this deal.
We subsequently did see a list, and Hirsch was on that list.
How do you make sense of that deal being so close and then weeks later, Hirsch being killed?
It's one of the many things that we don't make sense of yet. I don't know that we ever will.
Do you know what happened to the men who killed Hirsch?
They do know that the IDF did kill 2 of them. I have no interest in the people who killed him. I really don't.
The footage of Hirsch, his arm blown off, being taken to Gaza, now a haunting symbol of the suffering of October 7th.
Hirsch and all the hostages, and by extension, all the hostage families, were pawns in a game. And pawns in chess are expendable. Hirsch was our universe, and I acknowledge that he's not everyone's universe. But it was very clear that he was expendable to everyone but us.
Erin McLaughlin, NBC News, Jerusalem.
Just heartbreaking. Powerful report there, Erin. Thank you very much for bringing us that interview. Well, time now for your weather, and bundle up. In some places, chilly temperatures, like right here in New York, are in the works for parts of the country over the next couple of days. Angie Lassman, it was colder than I anticipated it being when I left this morning.
Well, you and me both. I mean, I knew it was going to be cold, but my brain hasn't been trained yet to grab my coat, Savannah, so I arrived to work today without a coat. I'll be paying for that later on the walk home. Either way, don't be like me. Do as I say, not as I do. Grab the jacket, especially if you live somewhere between the plains and the Northeast. We've got all of these kind of frost freeze alerts up. 60 million people included in that. We've got some major cities of Kansas City, Columbus, Harrisburg, Lexington. All of those locations are included in this, as our temperatures are just barely into the 40s in some spots, and in some locations they were earlier today in the 30s. Still hanging onto the 30s in places like Duluth, Madison. We've got 37 for Hartford. Sioux Falls sitting at 29 degrees right now, so that's going to be a bit of a taste of winter for you this morning. But mid-40s for Omaha, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, even Dover, and even as far south as Asheville, still into the 40s. This afternoon, we get a little bit of a bump up in our temperature. temperatures for that chunk of the country, but it's still going to be below normal for this time of year. We've got low 60s for Nashville. We've got upper 50s for Omaha, Milwaukee into the low 50s. But look just past the Rockies and you'll see temperatures in the 80s, feeling more like summer for Albuquerque. Dallas today, 91 degrees. Just up the road in Omaha, we're into the 50s. So a bit of a difference in our temperatures, kind of a tale of two sides of the country when it comes to seasons over the next couple of days. Here's a look at tomorrow's temperatures. Not much improvement. New York tops out at 55 degrees, so it'll be another chilly morning tomorrow as well. Rapid City, Denver, you're back to the 80s. And then we see a gradual rebound here by the time the end of the work week comes and we go from the upper 50s in New York City to the low 70s on Saturday. Similar story for Chicago, mid 60s Thursday and back to the 70s by Saturday. One note, we do have a front that has pushed offshore and kind of ushered in this cooler air. With that, we're still seeing some unsettled weather, so you might run into a little bit of rain across the Great Lakes in the Midwest and stretching to the Northeast today. That'll be out of the picture here at least before you know it, but we won't, but not before we pick up a little bit of snow in some of those higher elevations. So 'tis the season.
There we go. You know, you look so appropriately dressed in studio. This is such a nice fall, nearly winter look.
It is a sweater dress, so I've got that going for me, but you know, I'm just out of practice with grabbing my coat.
I know. I did bring like a light one this morning, and it's still,
So you were cozy then?
I was cozy, but I was shocked at how cold it was in the
Now
40s.
you guys know all about our wardrobe choices.
And what goes on in the 4 a.m.s in my house in the middle of the night in your house.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Angie. Of course.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.